All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos on this channel, and today is our 14th video that we've done reading through Daniel Ingram's book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And this is basically reference work that is on all things Buddhism, but especially a lot of gems, hard-fought gems coming related to insight meditation and awakening in general, liberation, and some concrete steps and maps that you can use to help you on your way. I wouldn't even consider this to be religion in any way. This is really like science that's plugged into ethics. We'll be talking about that a little bit more as we get further into this book, and as we talk a little bit more about the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson, and what he has to say about religion, and you know, we did almost 600 videos on the reciprocal system earlier, and so it's covered in there, but we'll just bring it to the fore as we move on here. Now we are I have trouble keeping track of time, so I ran out of time yesterday in the middle of a section, and the section is on rapture. Now he has basically two kinds of raptures. One is singular, which are here he says spiritual practice can produce all kinds of odd experiences, some of which can be very intense, bizarre, and far out. And then that is, and then he says this is the second connotation of the word rapture. And he refers to those in the plural as raptures. So when the word is in the singular, rapture, this means being enraptured with your sensate world. It can also mean an upwelling of pleasant euphoria. Okay, so all of the crazy experiences that you might have in your on your meditation cushion, those you would call raptures, while being enraptured in your meditation objective is going to be in the singular. Okay. I may have read part of this paragraph last time, but we'll keep moving here. This is a good place for me to mention the concept of Vedana, a Pali word that relates to the degree of pleasantness, unpleasantness, or neutrality of a sensation. We have no similar word in English, so perhaps we should just use the word Vedana as it is. If we pay too much exclusive attention to sensations that are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, while ignoring the other sensations going on at that time, we are likely to miss many opportunities for insight. Preoccupation with pleasant sensations can cause us to become vapid bliss junkies. Preoccupation with unpleasant sensations can cause us to become dark and depressed. Preoccupation with neutral sensations can cause us to become dull and emotionally flat. Our experience tends to be a complex mixture of many flavors of sensations. They are all quite worthy of investigation. Becoming fluent in the vast range of our varied experiences makes meditation much more interesting, workable, and broad. and is required to pass the final exam, as it were. The take-home here is that rapture and raptures are to be understood as they are and should be related to wisely, accepting all sensations that make them up, be they pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Learn when to put the brakes on, practice. If the difficult raptures are teaching you their important lessons a bit too fast for you to keep it together, and learn how to open to the wonderful joy and bliss that spiritual practice may sometimes produce. Okay, this section is called tranquility. And this is another one of the 7 factors of awakening. Joy, bliss, rapture are relatively satisfying things. And this satisfaction can produce tranquility. We can associate being peaceful with tranquility. Focusing on tranquility and a more spacious and silent perspective in the face of difficult raptures can help you ride them out. And just sitting silently and observing reality do its thing can be very powerful practice. There are whole schools of spiritual practice dedicated to this. Thus, tranquility is a good thing in meditation. We may think of great spiritual masters being internally tranquil. And while it may or may not be true, there are reasons that we associate tranquility with spirituality. A mind that is not tranquil will have a harder time concentrating and being balanced. Simple as that. Being kind and moral also help develop tranquility, as moral conduct lessens harsh and therefore agitating thought and behavior patterns, which necessarily obstruct tranquility. This does not mean that agitated, non-tranquil moments are not spiritual, or that we must adopt some sort of restrained and artificial flatness. Remember, all types of sensations, mind states, and actions are valid phenomena for investigation and real expressions of what is going on. Authentic tranquility comes from a deep understanding of this, but all too often this ideal becomes a dehumanizing exercise in passivity or robotic lack of emotional affect. Real tranquility often comes naturally, though it may be skillfully cultivated as well, such as by just tuning in to that quality as an exercise in calm abiding, or more formally, by doing concentration practices and cultivating deep states of stillness and peace, the afterglow of which can be very useful for investigation if we can rouse up a little energy and interest afterwards. Cultivating equanimity of the kind mentioned later is helpful for developing tranquility, as is deepening in pure concentration practices, the second spiritual training. Tranquility, concentration, and equanimity are are intimately related. And so this section here is called concentration. Concentration we have seen twice before, and we will see it again in much more detail in part 3. So I will give it a short treatment here. One of the challenges of deep tranquility is keeping the mind concentrated. This may seem like a direct contradiction to what I have just said, but there may be stages of practice where there can be so much tranquility that the mind can become dull and hard to focus. So, just as tranquility is good for concentration and acceptance, too much is similar to not having enough energy. Remember, balance and strengthen, strengthen and balance. As these are the 7 factors of awakening, they apply directly to insight practices and training in wisdom. Thus, the concentration referred to here is a very different kind of concentration than that used for attaining high concentration states. It is called momentary concentration. In the context of insight, concentration really means that we can consistently investigate each sensation that arises, one after another, second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour. When we can practice moment after moment, sensation after sensation, but just before we shift into the stages of insight, this is also called access concentration, only achieved with a different set of emphases, and it will shortly lead to the stages of insight. In this way, we have stability in our ability to investigate, in that it can happen again and again without interruption. But we are not trying to attain stable states or anything else, since we are doing insight practices. Okay, this section is called equanimity. As mentioned before, concentration can produce great stability and consistency of mind, and this can lead to equanimity, which is that quality of mind that is okay with things, or balanced in the face of any internal or external painful, pleasurable, or neutral condition, including a lack of equanimity. This may sound a bit strange, but it is well worth considering. Equanimity also relates to a lack of struggle, even when struggling, to effortlessness, even in effort, to peacefulness, even when there is no tranquility. When equanimity is well developed, we are not frightened of being afraid, concerned by being worried, irritated by being annoyed, pissed off by being angry, etc. Phenomena do not disturb space or even fundamentally disturb themselves from a certain point of view. I have wept and yet been very equanimous about it. If that helps clarify what I am talking about, equanimity can be regarded as a meta perspective, able to hold everything else. There are lots of different technical uses of the term equanimity in Buddhism, so watch for its various meanings in different contexts. There are entire spiritual traditions that involve just tuning in to this basic truth. There can be great value in learning to include the space that holds things, rather than just being caught up in things themselves. A useful phrase from one of these traditions is cultivating space-like meditative purpose. The more we habituate to this way of being, the more we connect with the truth of our minds. Real equanimity has a spaciousness to it, an openness, a flowing, volumetric component that is important. There are also some excellent teachings, especially from Zen and Taoism, that relate to this, such as the teachings about no defilements, no enlightenment. Or said another way, practice itself is enlightenment, or as enlightenment. Nothing to perfect, nowhere to go, etc. And checking in with some of these teachings can be very helpful, particularly if we are stuck in the feeling that the goal is unattainable. I will talk more about the dangers and uses of such perspectives in Part 5. This is the important counterbalance to spiritual striving and gung-ho practice that can get very future-oriented if done incorrectly. In the end, even if you have all kinds of insights, if you don't have equanimity, you will be beating your head against the wall, and it actually might feel like that or worse. I realized since receiving feedback on the first edition of this book that when I wrote this book, I had access to many written and living examples of softer styles of practice and very skillful yet non-gung-ho perspectives. Some examples are Achan Cha's A Still Forest Pool, and Shunryu Suzuki's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, as well as the gentle, settling, heart-centered, down-to-earth, and non-map-based styles of meditation teachers, Sharda Rogel and Yvonne Wire. If you don't have the opportunity to sit with them, you can find their talks and many other great meditation talks for free on www.dharmaseed, DHARMASEED.org, and on YouTube. As important as the profound words they say is the way they say them. Pay attention to that. Check out the YouTube videos of Aya Tarhaloka, Tarhaloka, and that's the good stuff. Being influenced by gentler approaches really helped me with the equanimity part of the equation, which was not my forte. And I recommend that you find something for yourself that serves to balance my vibe. Looking back, I feel that balancing my practice by exposure to these sorts of influences facilitated a settling into what was happening naturally, and that my practice would have been much more difficult without exposure to that sort of gentler approach. Once again, we are back to knowing this moment just as it is. This just as it is quality is related to mindfulness and to equanimity. In the end, we must accept the truth of our specific lives or our minds and our neuroses, of our defilements, of impermanence, of suffering, of emptiness. We must accept this, and this is what they are talking about when they say, just open to it, be with it, let it be, let it go, and so on. From a pure insight practice point of view, you can't ever fundamentally let go of anything. So I sometimes wish the popularity of this misleading and apathy-producing admonition would decline, or at least be properly explained or challenged. However, if you simply investigate the truth of the three characteristics of the sensations that seem to be solid, you will come to the wondrous realization that reality is continually letting go of itself. Thus, let it go means don't artificially solidify a bunch of transient sensations. It does not mean stop feeling or caring, nor does it mean pretend that the noise in your mind is not there. If people start with just open to it, yet don't develop both strong mindfulness and careful investigation into the three characteristics to gain deep insights, their practice may be less like meditation and more like psychotherapy, daydreaming, cultivated passivity, denial, or even self-absorbed, spiritually rationalized, neurotic indulgence in mind noise. Noticing again and again the prevalence of this activity and the pervasive and absurd notion that there is no point in trying to get awakened has largely demolished my vision of being a happy meditation teacher in some mainstream meditation center. On the other hand, Even if you gain all kinds of strong concentration, look deeply into impermanence, suffering, and no self, the three characteristics, but can't open to these things, can't let them be, can't accept the seemingly absurd and frightening truths of your experience, then you will likely be stuck in hell until you can, particularly in some of the higher stages of insight practice. Reflect on these previous 3 paragraphs now and often, as many errors on the spiritual path come from not understanding the points made therein. Too often there is an imbalance between the first 3, mindfulness, investigation, and energy, and the last 3, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. Most aspiring insight meditators are, to be honest, way too slack about the first 3. Just so, some gung-ho meditators, like the people who have tended to be attracted to this book, may get into trouble when they don't cultivate enough acceptance, balance, and peace related to the last 3. When people focus too long only on the middle factor, rapture, they become bliss junkies. When they fail to include rapture in their practice, they often get darker and gloomier despite otherwise good effort. In short, it is critical to cultivate all 7 factors. The order here is important. Start with good technique, mindfulness, investigation, etc., and work on the others along the way. In summary, you must have both insights and acceptance, and each perspective can and should help the other along the way. They are actually one and the same, but getting to that understanding generally benefits from a whole lot of good practice. In other words, if you are getting nowhere and not much is happening, you probably need more of the first 3. If you are frying yourself on the path of insight, as evidenced by becoming uptight, wound up, reactive, cranky, angry, frustrated, edgy, or nervous, then it is time to ease up, back off, learn concentration practices, do some loving kindness or similar practices, and cultivate the skillful aspects of the last 3 factors, and perhaps a bit more rapture in the stop and smell the roses sense. Many hardcore meditators will ignore this piece of advice to their detriment, assuming it is only being plugged into 100,000 volts and flipping on the big switch that anything good will ever happen. Numerous points along the way should help elucidate how to find this balance and the markers of progress versus being stuck. One last thing about equanimity, its near enemy, the deadening imposter, is indifference or apathy. Real equanimity is accepting the full range of the heart and experience, whereas indifference is dry, flat, chilly, dissociative, robotic, and heartless. Real equanimity is extremely honest about what is going on. It is very human, very down to earth, very full spectrum, and very ordinary in most ways. This point is frequently misunderstood. However, being accepting of the full range of the heart doesn't mean acting on whatever impulse comes up. Act only on the impulses of the heart that seem genuinely skillful and kind. Real equanimity is even accepting of the fluxing sensations that make up flatness, strangely enough, but it is more honest about them. There is a fine line, but the point remains. Plenty of people practice based on a model that idealizes objectifying all feelings and sensations. Because of this ideal, they hold their emotions at arm's length and cultivate immunity or passivity to them. The ideal of letting it all come and go without attaching any importance to any of it sounds so very nice, so very Buddhist. However, instead of cultivating actual equanimity, they accidentally cultivate denial, repression, dissociation, depersonalization, derealization, and a stabilized illusion of some split off and distant or objective observer. This indifference and denial can easily flip over into ugly and treacherous forms of passive aggression. Beware of this trap, as it is extremely common and is the exact opposite of insight practices, being largely a dressed up exercise in finely honed aversion and ignorance rather than a careful investigation of this real human life. To balance and perfect the 7 factors of awakening is sufficient cause for awakening. Thus, checking in from time to time with this list and seeing how you are doing and what might need improvement is a good idea. Just having this list in the back of your mind can be helpful. Furthermore, the 7 factors of awakening make for great meditation description and categorization that guides the process of self-correction. For example, we might say, that last sit was characterized by a moderate degree of mindfulness, a pretty high degree of investigation, moderate energy, not very good rapture, poor tranquility, moderately good concentration, and a pretty low degree of equanimity. Being able to use this list to assess sits, meditation events, and various stages of practice will give us a sense of what we need to work on to round out our practice, as well as possibly to identify the phase of practice, as we shall see in a bit when we get to the maps, as each stage has its characteristic pattern of qualities, strengths, and weaknesses. This sort of description will also help us when we work with teachers, as learning to skillfully describe our meditation is a skill worth grounding in standard terms when possible. We can use this framework. Sorry, I screwed up here. I lost my screen. What's going on now? Okay. We can use this framework during sits to try to recalibrate our practice as we recognize imbalances. The meta perspective on our practice that develops if we can do this will benefit us in many ways, since not only does it give us the presence of mind to adjust our practice, just being able to recognize the qualities of our mind has its uses and brings awareness to some of the core aspects of our way of being in that moment. While it might be possible to be too hypervigilant about the factors, most practitioners would benefit from increasing the degree to which they monitor them in their practice sessions and life in general. It is important to note that only one of the 7 factors, namely investigation of the 3 characteristics, distinguishes training in concentration from training in fundamental insight. When intentionally training in concentration, we decide to be mindful of a limited and specific concentration object, such as the breath, a mental image, or even a rarefied state of consciousness. We do not, however, investigate the individual sensations that make up the state of meditating with that object, as the object of focus would dissolve under that investigation, and produce insights. If we are not looking for ultimate insights at that point in time, then we should avoid investigating that state. However, if we do apply energy to stabilize our concentration, and this produces rapture, a characteristic of the early concentration states. We also strongly cultivate concentration along with tranquility and equanimity, which help us stabilize early states and attain to higher ones. Thus, 6 of the 7 factors of awakening are cultivated by training in concentration. And so concentration practices are often recommended by some teachers as a preliminary training before training in insight for this and other reasons. Training in morality also develops some of the 7 factors of awakening, though in a less formally meditative way. To work well in the ordinary world, it is helpful to be extremely mindful of our actions of body, speech, and mind, as well as what effects these actions might produce in the world, so that we can consciously work to craft to the best of our ability the life we want to lead. For obvious reasons, it is helpful to exert energy as we craft our life. We can cultivate rapture with life that allows natural and playful curiosity about the remarkable fact of experience itself. We also cultivate tranquility, the ability to not take life too seriously, to relax, to find a balance between focus and ease that makes for a good life. We can learn to concentrate on staying on track with our tasks, goals, and aspirations, though in this case, concentration is more like a form of discipline than the concentration of formal meditation. To be sure, discipline of actions of body, speech, and mind are vital for the other 2 trainings. Finally, we learn that we cannot get rid of all of the bumps on our road. So having the shock absorbers of equanimity, the ability to remain spacious, even-minded, and accepting of what life brings, including our honest, human, and understandable reactions, is also very helpful for crafting a good and healthy life. All right, that's the end of that chapter. And the next chapter is called The 3 Trainings Revisited. So we'll get back, and tomorrow we'll go over